Thank you, Jim. As he just said, I am Quinn Cowing, and I'm talking about a project I completed last semester as part of my cartography course. My professor's in the audience. And the topic is Untangling Rhode Island's forest habitat, interactive mapping at the confluence of art and cartography. So first I'm going to give a little overview about what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. I'm going to go into the goals of the project that I had at the outset of my project, then the inspirational maps that I was looking at to inspire what I was going to do, then my final project, and the construction of that product and future applications such as what I'm doing with my thesis right now. So as far as my project goals, first I know that I want to pursue work in conservation after I graduate, so I wanted to work with those kinds of data sets. So I worked with a forest habitat type for Rhode Island was my data set. Then I knew I wanted to challenge myself with a map that was non-digital, non-print, but tactile, a less conventional map format. And then I also knew that I needed to create an interactive map, just because I was very interested in doing that. I considered interactivity as a major tool in making maps more accessible, and I wanted to kind of toy with that and make my map more accessible to specifically different age groups. I imagined this piece as more accessible due to the aspect of physical experimentation that one can have with my map as a way of promoting more self-guided learning. Works with this in mind, I feel expand potential for individual learning and creativity when looking at the topic. I also wanted to increase accessibility of interactive maps to classroom environments, such as those with limited computer access. So as far as my map inspirations, on the top left, you can see Pierre Novat's work. He did a lot of beautiful paintings for ski resorts specifically, and people really touted his work as an example of realism. Yet what I drew away from it was plausible deformation, because these works are actually extremely distorted in order to make it more accessible to a skier's point of view. So I thought it was interesting to look at as something viewed as realism, but yet quite extremely distorted. Then I looked at the top right is an example of what's called colcha embroidery. It's a type of embroidery that intertwines history, religion, and culture into maps of Colorado's San Luis River Valley. These maps weave geography with specific cultural sites and rich histories to make more accurate representations of local areas and the people that live in them. Then, these ones are a little closer to home. Kate LaRue, who you may have seen around here, and also work by Heather Smith, worked to show me about embroidery works that highlight the beauty and fine details of landscapes in comparison to colcha embroidery, which elevates more cultural mapping. And lastly, my professor linked me to a previous NACIS talk where Cara Pryor cross-stitched the geology of various regions. And I was really excited by this idea as it presented a way that I could maybe grid my data set to facilitate the ability to embroider more of my data, but with less fine detail. So while these maps and also artworks heighten aesthetics, cultural significance, fine detail, among many other things, I knew that I wanted my embroidered map to elevate map interactivity. So I came up with a plan to embroider each layer of my map on a separate sheet of tulle. This came with many challenges, but I thought of it as a very exciting way to facilitate layer manipulation with a more tactile map. It almost feels a little criminal to first introduce my map to you in this manner, but I will go into greater depth about the construction process so you can get a better look at the work. And I'm actually going to hand out the embroidery loops while I talk about it, so you'll get to. And so now now that you've seen it, we can look into the map construction. So first, I worked with the data set. I cleaned an extensive data set of forest types in Rhode Island. I specifically narrowed it down to 6 of the major forest types, and it's a very beautiful, extremely detailed data set, which was great to look at, but in fact, far too much detail when it came down to the math. I looked at a slightly pixelated version that I created, and it would have to be 2,700 pixels by 3,380 pixels, which would need a 11-foot by 14-foot piece of fabric to keep that level of detail, which would be about 2.5 mies by 2 mies, which was not really attainable in part of one semester. So I went through a data abstraction process where I just continued to pixelize my data until I was able to get a scale that would be able to translate to about a 10-inch embroidery hoop. So I was trying to emulate a classic cross-stitch pattern, so just creating the pixels to be like what one would traditionally use for that sort of project. And I'll play a little video, to describe sort of what I did. But as you can see, I started with the Rhode Island outline and then continued to embroider layer by layer. In order to embroider on tulle, I had to do a lot of thinking on the fly. I used highlighters, extremely awkward angles, and new knots to imprint the pattern on the tulle, and then embroider by trying to minimize bulky knots and any stitches, because what I had not thought about was that if you embroider on tulle, you can see everything on the front and the back. So there was a lot of trial and error, and also to be very gentle with the fabric. And then I concluded with a north arrow and a legend. I felt they were two must-haves for my map. I'll let the last layer build. Yay. All right. And so we do not need to see that again. But for the sort of impacts that I had on my project, I wouldn't have been able to conceptualize my thesis project that I'm going to be doing this year if I hadn't done this project. It really helped me to explore creativity with mapping accessibility in ways that you can facilitate youth engagement with more tactile maps. As far as personal gains, I learned a lot of things you can do with embroidery, but I know that I need to take a break from embroidery after this project. And here are my citations. And I want to give a special thanks to Seda, who's in the audience, who pushed me to do this presentation and this project. I think we may have time for one question.
Oh, yeah, we have some. Yeah, we have time for questions. Well, that was amazing.
Thank you.
I'm sure there must. Oh, let me turn this on. There must be somebody out there with a question who does embroidery about this. But I think combining the art with cartography, I haven't seen this before, and I think it's just awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's one in the back.
Oh.
Oh, and in the front.
I guess this is kind of going off of Kate's presentation last year, because I know she split her embroidery floss into thinner pieces since it's usually 6-strand. Did you consider doing that?
I did. Okay. I used single strands for the legend, and then I did 2-strand for everything else, pretty much.
All right. Let's give. Thank you.